matters and the uncensored truth. It's time for the Mr. Chris Show Underground. News and commentary.
The day after Veterans Day, I'd like to first start with a thanks to all past and present veterans of all wars and all skirmishes, all battles, and all endeavors. Thank you for your service. Unlike the mainstream media that has to say it, we actually mean it. So let's get into it. A lot of things are still going on. We do not have resolution at this point, but the gears of progress are moving forward, and there's been some astounding developments going on. So, as you know, there's a disputed election. The patriots know that. Those who are awake, those like us that are enlightened know this. The mainstream media, however, of course, operated by the deep state, wants you to believe otherwise. SSK Brown has told us many things about that. I have a various set of articles, if you want to refer to, at mrchris.com. And it should be noted that although we've seen some censorship in the mainstream media, more is likely to come. And especially when Trump goes ahead with saying more, when he gets censored, probably a lot more people are going to be censored. So the videos and such that you see on various social media platforms are fine and are working at the moment. However, you should always remember to go back to mrchris.com for information and where to be directed to, and so on and so forth. So let's get into it. There's a bunch of new information regarding the fraud, the recounts and such. But I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to 2016. Let's go back to the Hillary Clinton versus Trump 2016 election. So then we had a situation where it was clear that Trump was winning, and mainstream media, all they could do was talk about collusion, talk about interference, talk about fraud, talk about recounts. However, in this day and age, right now in 2020, we don't hear any of that. We hear Biden won, Biden's elected, and of course, like I said before, and as you know, the media does not call the election, okay? The media reports on things, at least they're supposed to, but they do not call it, okay? They don't have the power, they don't have the authority, okay? So let's be clear on that. At this moment in time, Biden has not won the election. It's very clear and simple. So recently, Hillary was quoted. This was for a Showtime presentation called The Circus. This is August 26th, and she's, of course, talking about Joe Biden. But she says that he should not concede under any circumstance. And she further goes on to say that it's going to drag out and that in the end he will win. So it's interesting how Hillary in August of this year talks about Biden, talks about this. However, the mainstream media has a foregone conclusion that Trump lost and he should concede. So why is it that we have one side that it's okay to not concede, it's okay to count every ballot and to look into irregularities as they did in 2016, but now it's not? Well, of course, the answer is extremely simple, and that's because we have a two-way street here that is highly favored in one direction with many lanes, and the other has roadblocks, obstacles, and potholes. And that's what they're trying to give to us, the patriots. Because, of course, the globalists' whole idea is to take over America and put it part of the globalist system. And we're pretty much the last piece for the entire world for them to do this master plan, which has been going on for a long, long time. So if we get back to 2016, there was all sorts of articles articles, all sorts of mentions of irregularities, collusion, interference, fraud, Russians, and it's striking that you don't hear that today. It's striking. It's sad. It's predicted. It's you know what it is. So let's look at some of the irregularities. So there's basically these voting machines, Dominion machines with software, connected to Nasty Pelosi's husband and others. There's a Soros connection in here for funding. There's all sorts of other connections in here to the Democratic Party. Of course, if the Republicans had anything to do with this, they would say automatically it's invalid and the whole thing is fraud. But the media overlooks this, of course. It was shown on a video that's been going around that you could gain admin access to the machines in under 2 minutes. Actually, if you did it quickly, it's less than 60 seconds. And the Patriot showed that you just simply turn it off, remove a card on the side, open up the other side, push a button, and on the screen hit a couple of messages to get out of the way, and you have admin access, and you can do whatever you want. Now, it's interesting to note that in all of the cases, not one, not few, but every single case where the voting machine has flipped votes from Trump to Biden, it has been a one-way street. In other words, there has been no flipping from votes of Biden to Trump. It's been the other way in every single instance. There's also lost votes. There's also lost in the order of thousands of votes. How do you have thousands and thousands of lost votes in these machines through the software? Pretty weird. They talk about glitches, and I've heard conjecture on both sides about, well, there's glitches and it's a software thing. Well, you can easily prove the glitch versus intended software if you actually take the code and test it. There's many experts in the IT field that can do this, and these machines need to be examined and audited in the full with their source code exposed. Now, I don't know how the machines are actually geared up and how the code is brought to the machines. I'm assuming it's compiled some way, which makes it difficult to pull that out. However, you can set up a simulation like a black box to test the software and put inputs in and get inputs out. So even if you can't see the code, there are tests that you can do in order to figure out what the program is doing, and then you can determine whether or not it is a glitch or it is intended that the software was designed that way. So going on with more of this fraud, there's different recounts and there's different legal actions and challenges that Trump is bringing forward. Looks like Pennsylvania has a very strong case. The other ones we are looking at right now. Interesting to note, back in 2016, we had groups calling for a what? Recount for Hillary Clinton. And guess which states they were targeting? Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Why do these things keep coming up in these places? Why are there irregularities? Well, I think we know the answer because people are trying to rig the system, but they're always looking into this, and it's always these kind of states. And that happened in 2016. Of course, now we don't have Biden asking to look into that. And why not? Anytime it's so close, there are rules and laws about recounts, and it's not unusual. If Trump only had, let's say, 5% of the vote and Biden had 95%, people wouldn't be so concerned about a recount. But isn't it reasonable to look for a recount when it's close? I mean, any common the average person who's not tied to any political party, I think you would find that they would probably say, yes, we should recount if it's close. In any country, the country where I'm in, anywhere else, if something is close, you look into it. Also, if there are allegations, and then at that point in 2016, there were allegations about the voter fraud, and they had evidence that they wanted to look into, and they did. But the mainstream media didn't crucify them for that at the time in 2016. But now it's a conspiracy theory. It's always a conspiracy theory when it doesn't fit the narrative. So this stuff is nothing new. This goes on and on. The battle wages on, and as I pointed out, 11H has said that we're all digital warriors, and there's digital soldiers all the way. And I just want to make mention of that, especially because in light of Veterans Day, that we have other non-commissioned officers and enlisted here that are enlisted by our want for truth and justice as patriots. So everybody who's helping out is a patriot. It doesn't matter if you're forwarding an email, forwarding some article that you saw, talking to a neighbor or a friend about the situation. That's all helpful, and that's all part of this thing. If we go back to the American Revolution, there was a lot of things that happened, of course, by word of mouth. They didn't have internet and computers back then. But the thing to remember, for instance, there was a gentleman, Hercules Mulligan. So there's this Hamilton play and such that has presented some facts regarding the Revolutionary War and has flavored it for various reasons that he wanted to. And that's fine. However, if we look at the reality of it is he did point out Hercules Mulligan. The person was a tailor, okay? And the tailor actually would stand there, measure and do all sorts of things, talk to the officers, the British officers, and they felt pretty comfortable. And between themselves, they didn't think anything of a tailor, right? Actually, the tailor was collecting all the information, was a hub for passing information. And at the time, he had a slave named Cato, and Cato was given jobs to go send this information out. And they didn't think anything of that. Cato running an errand for Hercules Mulligan. And this was going right under their noses. And these were all patriots. So a patriot from Cato all the way up is a patriot, okay? And that's what we need to remember, and that's what we need to stay firm as far as our duties, to stay strong, stay to the course, and we will see this thing through. So let's look at some other things that are going on. AOC, we all know who AOC is, don't want to even mention the name, thankfully. She is compiling the list. Okay, so what is the list? Well, she's not the only one that's compiling it. Apparently, there's many others that are compiling the list, and what this list is going to do is identify those who supported Trump. And we don't have just people who are giving donations to the Trump campaign. We have other people that identify, people with signs on their lawn, people with stickers on their car, neighbors who hear something. Where have we heard this before? Let's see. I kind of remember Nazi Germany and how people were reported for not going along with the Reich. So, is this any different? If you don't go along with the Biden Reich or the Democratic leftist Reich, then you're an enemy and you will be on the list. The list to do what? The list to bring charges against? The list to round up and put into concentration camps? Blacklist? It's sort of odd and ironic. The McCarthy era was denounced by the left as horrible. However, when it's to get Trump supporters, that's okay. This is completely hypocritical, as we know, but this is exactly what they're doing, and this is why we need to fight it. You can see that it's a fight of good versus evil. This is not political party, this is good versus evil, and there's evil amongst all the parties, okay, and there's good amongst the parties, more so in one than the other, it appears. I'm not going to judge everybody, but you can easily see it. And the Bible tells us you can tell a tree by the fruit that it bears. It's very simple. The one who bears poisonous fruit, no matter how it looks like, is poisonous. Okay, it's very simple. The one who bears good fruit that is edible and tastes good and is healthy for you, it's good. It's very easy. You don't have to really think too far outside the box for this kind of stuff. So AOC has the list, others have the list. There's a web page where you can give them information about supporters and people to identify people. Of course, this is all fine according to the mainstream mainstream media, if they even report on it, which they have reported on a little bit, but of course they put the spin on it, of course, as well too. Well, these are people's frustrations. They have to air their frustrations. Otherwise, it's a healthy thing. Let's talk to an expert psychologist or psychiatrist. Let's see what their thoughts are. Well, I think it's very healthy to air these things. So this is the kind of rhetoric, the kind of nonsense that just goes on and on and on. We've seen it many times before. So let's also talk about this pandemic, how it sort of falls into all this stuff. Well, we see there's case numbers, okay? Well, look beyond that, okay? Look at the death rate. Look at the world statistics for death rate. Do you realize that throughout the world, there are about 4,000 people that die a day from diarrhea-related illnesses? Okay, isn't one death too much? I mean, you think about it, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of people just from the one thing. We're not talking car accidents, we're not talking cancer, we're not talking heart attacks, we're not talking anything like that. Diabetes-related issues, kidney failure. We're talking about something related to diarrhea, which could be like dysentery or various things. Point is, people are dying every day of this, okay? And to me, it sounds like a pandemic, right? It happens throughout all the world, all people, okay? Why are we not concerned about that? Well, it's very simple, because we've been trained like animals in a cage to go over, push a button, and get a banana, and this is what's happened. So the masks are just a symbol that enforces this, okay? This is a muzzle. I've said it before at MrChris.com. There's an article regarding this, and it goes on and on. But let's look at the PCR tests that are the basis for this pandemic and the case numbers. Well, the PCR test takes a look, and they have various steps. I won't go into all details. I'm not a biologist by any means, so I cannot give you the detailed facts. But it's a test that works on multiple instances of looking at the sample until you basically find something. The problem is we don't have a golden set to compare against to find out exactly what it is, okay? As far as I can tell from doing research in the past week, it's not even clear that anybody even understands this virus, and there's still conjecture out there from early on that questions the existence itself of it, okay? And I think that it needs more examination. I'm not ready to pass judgment on it either, but I think it's very odd, and it's very odd because these PCR tests are capable of resolving fragments of something, the RNA from something. That something can be a virus. That something can be the flu shot that you just got. That something could be a cold that you had recently. That something could be a cold that you already got over. That could be something that you currently have. There's all sorts of possibilities tied to the PCR test. The PCR test is not 100% accurate in saying this virus you have for sure or you don't. And there's been challenges to this, and there's been papers, you can go look them up, on different sides of the continents that are questioning the validity of the PCR tests. So I think it's better to look at the overall picture. Let's use some logic here, okay, or common sense, which we're not supposed to use anymore. And that is, are people dying, okay? Do you see people dying in huge numbers? And let's not look at the cooked figures. Let's look at your friends and family. Let's talk to people. Let's on the ground, let's see what it is, okay? And I've come across many patriots who can't identify anybody close to them that supposedly has this, where they can verify symptoms and everything else, In fact, the opposite. I've gotten messages from patriots who's gotten sick, and they said, oh yeah, we thought this, that, and the other thing, and they went for a test, and the test showed negative. So, and these are people with the flu, so, it's not clear as to what's going on here, other than it doesn't make any sense. When you have kids that are going to school, there are certain states, I understand, in the United States, where the kids are going to school, grade school and high school. They take their masks off when they eat. Now, does that make any sense? And let's think about restaurants as well, too. If this is such a deadly virus that's so easy to spread, then how is it that people do not have this thing spread all around in exponential numbers by taking their masks off. Okay, if the masks are truly effective, as soon as you take them off, you're dead. You're dead, or you're exposing other people, and they're dead too, right? So if this is so bad, how does that happen? Okay, how are we getting away with this stuff? And you might say, oh, well, look at the recent case numbers and stuff. The recent case numbers are tied to seasonal flu. The recent case numbers are tied to colds. There's many, many things. Like I said, the PCR test is so inaccurate, we don't even know what it's actually coming up with. Does anybody really know? Has anybody followed through on all these tests? No. So it is a wild, wild west situation out there, and I think we need to understand that. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a couple things. Primarily, we are at a situation, as patriots as we are, to move this information around and discuss it. All right. And then on top of that, there is the resolution that we're looking for, the rightful calling for Trump as president when all the fraud is eliminated. When you eliminate all the fraud, all the ballots that were printed up that don't have the markings, you look at the deceased people that have voted for the last 10, 20, sometimes 100 years after their death. These are all remarkable, but this is coming up. You look at the postal agents, the whistleblowers, who the media has tried to smear, but if you look at the original recording, you will find that they did not recant on anything. And you look at people that worked at the election areas themselves tabulating where they talked about the fraud. They talked about how they were told to commit the fraud and were forced to commit the fraud. Of course, they need a paycheck, they need to work, so what are they going to do? Just the one person quit? They put them in a bad situation. And these people who ran all this fabrication and nonsense to force these innocent individuals to do things need to be held accountable, and hopefully they will. They will one day in the afterlife, but we want them held accountable now as well. So that's all good and all that we have this situation that's being uncovered. But let's say it does uncover, because we were told by the mainstream media that only the Trump supporters riot and only them were rioting. Where are the riots right now? According to mainstream media, Trump lost. So where's the rioting? This is what we were told. Beverly Hills was boarded up in California because of the Trump rioters that want to come through and riot. They haven't, of course, because that whole thing is nonsense, and it's the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter, the anarchists and everybody on the left, the pawns and the idiots, they can assemble together to do this kind of bidding for them. So what happens? Well, we know for a fact, if this does get flipped around here, which we feel it will, then there's going to be riots, and we're going to see it widespread. And this is not going to be something simple. This is going to be something bigger. And unfortunately, it involves other things, and that is something that everybody's overlooked, and that's the trucking industry, okay? Your local store, grocery store, whatever it is, relies on deliveries, okay? Those deliveries, at least throughout the United States, are primarily done by trucking. Trucking is what makes America move, okay? If there's so much rioting, and if there's burning and they're shooting cars on the freeway going in metropolises, the truckers aren't going to go, okay? You're not going to have supplies. On top of that, the tankers, the tanker trucks for gas stations. In the United States, in a populated area, it takes one tanker per day to fill up the tanks in a populated metropolis area per station. There's others that take multiple, the larger warehouse places that sell gas. But I have got information from patriots who I know over the years who explain this to me, and you will not have gasoline, you will not have food, you will not have other provisions. Of course, as a patriot and somebody who preps for things like this, or any disaster, you're probably already prepared. But you need to think about these things, because the trucking industry could be shut down for a while if the freeways can't run and it's not safe to go into these cities. The outskirts and the other areas, they're probably okay, but the main cities, that's a big problem. And everyone needs to prepare for that adequately, and you need to do it now. Also, there's the question of defending yourself, and everybody needs to be able to defend themselves. And in the United States, you have the Second Amendment to defend yourself. There's various states that have tried to change that. There's various states that have tried to make it illegal for you to defend yourself, like the couple in St. Louis who defended themselves against the Black Lives Matter Antifa people and are in trouble for it. Hopefully, I haven't checked on the situation recently. We need to check on that again. But hopefully it resolves properly. There's also the Rittenhouse situation, and that's still ongoing and undetermined. But a person needs to be able to defend themselves, okay? And that's what the Second Amendment is actually there for. The Second Amendment is not there for you to have a musket to go shoot a pig. The Second Amendment is simply to defend yourself against the government in regards to a takeover. And if you don't believe that or want to hear it, that's fine. But if you want to go and look up the Articles of Confederation, you want to look at the notes from our founders and why they did this with the Constitution and made it the Second Amendment right behind free speech being first, it's all there. Okay, the media can tell lies about anything, but as we know, research it yourself. The Patriot does the research, right? So what we have coming up is possibly a storm, and supposedly Trump might talk about this at some point, and that is the storm is upon us. We've heard things by 11H telling us about those keywords, and that could be the trigger for the fact that things are about to happen. But we know that possibly it's going to get ugly. This thing gets switched back to its rightful position where Trump is the rightful president-elect a second time. And the left is not going to stand for this. They're not going to sit for it. They're not going to stand for it. So I would say that besides, as I've mentioned before, there's prayer. We need to be observant of who we are. We need to prepare, and we need to do the right thing. That's what a patriot does, okay? And you can see, like I mentioned before, a tree that bears a certain kind of fruit, okay? You can see how that is, and it's easy to see in the political arena who's who. But that's the course that needs to be stayed with. If there are large riots and censorships as a result of this, many avenues might be cut off. There was originally, back in the day, even websites that were taken down. Domain names for entire domains were removed. That could happen again. Like I said, MrChris.com, I have the site with the information, videos, audio, and other things that are on social media as well. But who knows? That could be removed as well. So going forward, we need to keep track of this fraud situation. We need to make sure that we have prepared adequate resources, and I think that if we do that and stand our ground, then people are going to make it through here. The whole world is watching, okay? And if you look at leaders like Putin, if you look at the Mexican president, they've held off on the congratulations. You can see who's extended congratulations early, and you can see who's definitely bought off in the deep state. Boris in the UK, unfortunately, appears to be compromised, and especially with the lockdowns and everything that's occurring, it's pretty clear to see what he's doing and who he is. So, let's hope that the recounts are proper and just. Let's hope that the courts that are possibly getting involved can see through all of this meddling, and we can get rid of the fraud. Because in the end, we want a good election system, regardless of who wins, who's ever the victor here. We want a system that ensures the right person wins. And we'll cover more next time, right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground News and Commentary.